r/ProRevenge grandmother stole my college fund at funeral, so I ruined Christmas. The words hit me like a physical blow across the face. College fund. Oh honey, there is no college fund anymore. I stood there in my ill-fitting black suit, still clutching the funeral program with my grandfather's photo on it, staring at my grandmother in complete disbelief. Around us, relatives murmured condolences and shared memories of Grandpa Joe, but their voices faded into white noise as her words sank in. What do you mean there's no college fund? My voice cracked like I was 12 again instead of 18. Grandma Helen smoothed down her black dress and adjusted her pearl necklace with the same casual air she used when discussing the weather. I withdrew it last month, dear. All $50,000. I needed it more than you do. The funeral home suddenly felt suffocating. The smell of lilies and furniture polish made my stomach churn. You took my college money. The money Grandpa saved for me since I was born. It was sitting there doing nothing, she said, waving her hand dismissively. Besides, college is just a waste of money these days. You young people expect everything handed to you on a silver platter. I felt like the ground was crumbling beneath my feet. That money wasn't just cash in an account, it was my acceptance letter to State University, my dorm room, my textbooks, my future. Grandpa Joe had worked double shifts at the factory for years, skipping his own pleasures to add $20 or $50 whenever he could. He'd shown me the statements every birthday, his eyes twinkling as he talked about Dr. Thompson and how proud he'd be to see me graduate. Grandpa wanted me to go to college, I whispered, my throat tight. He talked about it all the time. Well, Joe isn't here anymore, is he? Her voice turned sharp. And frankly, you've never shown the maturity or work ethic to deserve that kind of investment. You're lazy, ungrateful, and you have unrealistic expectations about life. The worst part wasn't even the money being gone, it was the cruel satisfaction in her eyes as she delivered each word like a calculated strike. She was enjoying this. At her own son's funeral, she was enjoying crushing my dreams. I have a 3.8 GPA, I managed to say. I work part-time at. Spare me the excuses. She turned toward a group of relatives near the casket. Your grandfather spoiled you rotten, filling your head with nonsense about being college material. Someone needs to teach you how the real world works. Then she did something that would haunt me for weeks afterward. She raised her voice just enough for nearby family members to hear. I've been trying to explain to our future college dropout here that the money is gone. Some children just can't accept that handouts don't last forever. She shook her head sadly, playing the long-suffering grandmother perfectly. I suppose we'll see what kind of character they really have now. Aunt Patricia looked over with confusion. Cousin Mike paused mid-conversation. Uncle Robert raised his eyebrows. In 30 seconds, she'd managed to make me look like an entitled brat having a tantrum at a funeral instead of the victim of theft. My face burned with humiliation and rage. This woman had just stolen my entire future and somehow made me the villain of the story. But as I stood there surrounded by the pitying stares of my relatives, something cold and calculating settled in my chest. Grandma Helen had just made the biggest mistake of her manipulative life. She thought she destroyed me. Instead, she'd just given me a mission. The rest of the funeral passed in a haze of forced smiles and hollow condolences. I went through the motions, shaking hands, accepting hugs, listening to stories about Grandpa Joe, while my mind raced with the enormity of what had just happened. Every time someone asked about my college plans, I felt the knife twist deeper. State University, right? Uncle Robert clapped me on the shoulder. Joe was so proud. Said you were going to study engineering. I managed a weak nod, not trusting my voice. Across the room, Grandma Helen held court near the flower arrangements, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue and accepting sympathy like the grieving widow she was pretending to be. Never mind that she'd spent the last 5 years of Grandpa's life complaining about everything he did. The real gut punch came during the reception at the community center. I was picking at a paper plate of potato salad when my phone buzzed with an email from State University's financial aid office. A reminder that my tuition deposit was due in 6 weeks, along with a cheerful note about starting this exciting new chapter of your life. $53,000 total for the first year. I had $847 in my savings account from my part-time job at the hardware store. You look pale, sweetie. My mom appeared beside me, her own eyes red from crying. Are you okay? I almost told her everything right there. Almost grabbed her arm and explained how her mother-in-law had just nuked my entire future with the casual cruelty of someone swatting a fly. But looking at her exhausted face, I couldn't add another burden to her grief. She'd already been through hell watching Grandpa deteriorate over the past year. Just tired, I lied. The next few days were torture. I kept waiting for someone to call it all a misunderstanding. Maybe Grandma had confused accounts, maybe there was some explanation that didn't involve her stealing my future. But when I finally worked up the courage to call the bank, the customer service representative confirmed my worst fears. The account was closed on November 15th by the primary account holder, Helen Thompson. The full balance was transferred to her personal checking account. November 15th. 3 days after Grandpa went into the hospital for the last time. She'd taken the money while he was dying. I hung up and stared at my acceptance letter, still pinned to my bedroom wall next to a photo of Grandpa and me at my high school graduation. In the picture, he was beaming with pride, his arm around my shoulders, both of us grinning at the camera. I'd never seen him happier than he was that day. The financial aid office was my next call, but they delivered exactly the news I expected. Without the college fund as collateral, I didn't qualify for enough loans to cover even half the costs. The academic scholarships I'd earned covered tuition, but room and board alone was $30,000 a year. You could always start at community college, the counselor suggested kindly. Transfer after 2 years when you've established more credit history. It wasn't a terrible plan, but it wasn't the plan Grandpa and I had made together. It wasn't the engineering program at State that he'd researched with me for hours. It wasn't the future he'd sacrificed for, working overtime until his arthritis screamed just to add another $50 to my account. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling and thinking about Grandma Helen's upcoming Christmas party. The elaborate annual celebration she'd been planning since August. The event she lived for every year, where she played the perfect hostess and loving matriarch for 30-plus relatives. The same relatives who now thought I was an entitled brat having a meltdown at a funeral. Slowly, carefully, a plan began to form. The hardest part about being robbed of your future isn't the money, it's pretending everything is normal while your world crumbles around you. For the next week, I went through the motions of regular life like a zombie. I showed up to my shifts at Morrison's Hardware, smiled when customers made small talk about my big college plans, and nodded along when my manager, Mr. Peterson, talked about giving me more hours to help with those textbook expenses. Every conversation felt like another small betrayal of the truth. The worst was when Mom found me staring at college brochures in the kitchen Tuesday night. Getting excited? She asked, kissing the top of my head. Dad would be so proud. He talked about your first semester constantly, wondered if you'd chosen your dorm yet, whether you'd join any clubs. My throat constricted. Yeah, I'm still figuring things out. She squeezed my shoulder. Take your time, honey. You've got your whole life ahead of you. I excused myself to the bathroom and dry heaved over the toilet for 10 minutes. Meanwhile, Grandma Helen had apparently moved on from destroying my life and was back to her favorite hobby, orchestrating her perfect Christmas celebration. She called the house 3 times that week, each conversation more insufferable than the last. I'm thinking of upgrading the catering this year, she told Mom during Wednesday's call, her voice carrying clearly through the kitchen. After all, Joe would have wanted us to celebrate his memory properly. Maybe that lovely company from downtown, the one that did Patricia's anniversary party. She was spending my college money on fancy appetizers. Thursday's call was about decorations. I've ordered the most beautiful centerpieces, real winter roses and gold accents. It'll be absolutely magical. A proper celebration of family and gratitude. Gratitude. The woman who'd stolen $50,000 from her dead husband's grandson was planning a party about gratitude. By Friday, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with, so I did something that probably crossed a line. I started researching Grandma Helen's finances. It wasn't as hard as you'd think. She was 73 and not exactly tech-savvy, which meant most of her information was scattered across easily accessible places. Her Facebook posts about expensive purchases. Her next-door complaints about property taxes. Her public records from the county assessor's office. What I found made my blood boil. Grandma Helen wasn't broke. She wasn't even close to broke. She owned her house outright, a 4-bedroom colonial worth at least $300,000. She had Grandpa's life insurance payout, which had to be substantial given his policy through the factory union. Her Social Security and his survivor benefits combined were more than enough to live comfortably. She hadn't taken my money because she needed it. She'd taken it because she could. But the real kicker came when I was scrolling through her recent Facebook posts. 3 days after the funeral, she'd shared photos from a shopping trip to the luxury mall across town. Designer purse. Expensive jewelry. New winter coat that probably cost more than I made in 2 months. The caption read, treating myself to a little retail therapy during this difficult time. Joe always said life was too short not to enjoy the finer things. #blessed #memories. She was literally flaunting my stolen future on social media. That's when I realized something crucial. Grandma Helen had made this personal the moment she decided to humiliate me at the funeral instead of just quietly taking the money. She could have transferred the funds and said nothing. Could have let me find out through the bank. Could have avoided the public spectacle entirely. Instead, she'd chosen to destroy my reputation along with my dreams. She'd wanted an audience for my pain. Well, if Grandma Helen wanted an audience, I'd give her one. Her precious Christmas party was exactly 5 weeks away. Saturday morning, I made my first real mistake. I was at Morrison's Hardware, mindlessly restocking screws and trying not to think about my imploding future, when Mrs. Patterson from down the street came in looking for light bulbs. She was one of those neighborhood gossips who knew everyone's business, and unfortunately, she knew mine too. "How's your grandmother holding up, dear?" she asked, selecting a package of LED bulbs. "Such a tragedy about your grandfather. At least she has that lovely Christmas party to look forward to, gives her something positive to focus on." I gritted my teeth and forced a smile. "She's doing great, actually. Really great." "Oh, that's wonderful to hear. And you must be so busy with college preparations. Helen was just telling me at the grocery store how excited she is about your future." My hand tightened around the box of screws I was holding. "She said that?" "Oh yes, just yesterday. Said the whole family was so proud, and that you were all set financially thanks to your grandfather's planning." Mrs. Patterson beamed at me. Such foresight, putting away money for education. Not many young people are so fortunate these days. The blood rushed to my ears. She was still lying. Even after stealing everything, Grandma Helen was continuing to play the supportive grandmother role in public while privately sabotaging my life. It was like she was getting some sick pleasure from maintaining the illusion while knowing she destroyed the reality. That's really something," I managed. After Mrs. Patterson left, I spent my lunch break in my car, hands shaking with rage. The casual cruelty was almost worse than the theft itself. She wasn't just satisfied with taking my money, she was actively enjoying the elaborate deception. But my anger made me sloppy. When I got home that evening, I immediately called the college financial aid office again, hoping maybe there was some option I'd missed. Some emergency fund or late application scholarship that could salvage the situation. "I'm sorry," the counselor said after reviewing my file. "Without that original funding source, there really aren't many options for this semester. The best I can suggest is deferring enrollment for a year while you save up, or starting part-time at the community college." I must have been talking louder than I realized, because when I hung up, Mom was standing in the kitchen doorway with a confused expression. "Honey, what was that about funding sources? Is there a problem with your college money?" My heart stopped. "No, I was just exploring additional financial aid options. Being thorough." She frowned. "Additional aid? I thought your grandfather's fund covered everything." "That's what he always said." "It does, I scrambled for a believable lie. I wanted to see if I could get scholarships to cover some of it, so there'd be money left over for graduate school later." The suspicion in her eyes didn't completely fade, but she nodded slowly. That's very responsible of you. Though you don't need to stress yourself out over it right now. Dad made sure you were taken care of. After she left, I slumped against the counter and realized I just created a new problem. If Mom started asking questions or decided to check on the fund herself, everything would explode before I was ready. I needed to be more careful, more controlled. But I also realized something else. I wasn't the only victim here. My parents believed the money was still there, safely waiting for my education. They were going about their lives thinking Grandpa's sacrifice had secured my future, having no idea that their grieving process was built on a lie. Grandma Helen hadn't just robbed me. She'd made my entire family unwitting accomplices in her deception. The Christmas party was in 4 weeks and 3 days. I needed to move faster, but I also needed to be smarter. Because now I had even more to expose than just theft. Sunday night, my carefully controlled facade finally cracked. I was helping Mom clean out some of Grandpa's belongings when she pulled out a manila folder labeled College Plans in his careful handwriting. Inside were printouts of State University's engineering program requirements, highlighted and annotated in his neat pencil marks. Notes about which professors had the best reputations. A campus map with the engineering buildings circled in red. But the worst part was the letter. It was addressed to me, dated just 2 months before he went into the hospital. Mom handed it over with tears in her eyes. I found this in his desk drawer. He must have been planning to give it to you for Christmas. My hands trembled as I unfolded the notebook paper. My dear future engineer. Asterisk, by the time you read this, you'll probably be getting ready for your first semester. I wanted you to know how proud I am of the person you've become. Every extra shift I worked, every dollar I saved, it was all worth it to see you chase your dreams, asterisk. Asterisk, the account is all set up for automatic transfers to cover your expenses. I've spoken with the financial aid office twice to make sure everything is in order. You won't have to worry about money, just focus on your studies and make this old man proud, asterisk. Remember, education is the one thing nobody can ever take away from you. All my love. Grandpa Joe. I barely made it to the bathroom before I threw up. Education is the one thing nobody can ever take away from you. The bitter irony was almost too much to handle. Grandpa had been wrong, someone absolutely could take it away, and she'd done it with surgical precision. When I finally composed myself and returned to the kitchen, Mom was setting out photo albums. Are you okay, honey? You look pale. Just emotional, I managed. It's hard, going through his things. She rubbed my shoulder sympathetically. I know. But he'd want us to celebrate his memory, not just mourn. Speaking of which, your grandmother called earlier about Christmas plans. My stomach dropped. What about them? She wants the whole family there this year. Said it's important to come together after losing Dad, show unity and gratitude for what we still have. Mom's voice took on that slightly strained tone she always used when discussing Grandma Helen. She's apparently going all out, hired professional caterers, new decorations, the works. She said she wants it to be extra special in your grandfather's honor. In his honor. Using money stolen from his grandson's future. That sounds expensive, I said carefully. That's what I thought too. When I asked how she could afford it, she just said Dad's life insurance was more generous than expected. Mom shook her head. I didn't want to pry, but it seems like a lot of money to spend on one party, even a memorial one. This was my opening. I could tell her everything right now, about the stolen fund, about Grandma's lies, about my imploding future. But something held me back. Maybe it was seeing how exhausted she looked, or maybe it was realizing that dropping this bomb would destroy our family before I'd figured out how to fix anything. Well, I said instead, I'm sure it'll be memorable. That was an understatement. By the time I was finished, Grandma Helen's Christmas party would be memorable for all the wrong reasons. But first, I needed allies. And I needed evidence that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. Because Grandma Helen had just made another crucial mistake, she was using stolen money to fund a public celebration, in front of every relative who'd watched her humiliate me at the funeral. She'd given me the perfect stage for her downfall. 3 weeks and 6 days to go. The breakthrough came from the most unexpected source, Grandpa's old address book. I was going through another box of his belongings Tuesday night when I found a worn leather book tucked beneath a stack of tax documents. Most of the entries were exactly what you'd expect, family phone numbers, his doctor's office, the hardware store where he'd bought supplies for decades. But there, written in his careful handwriting under B for bank, was something that made my heart race. College account, joint with Helen, emergency contact, Margaret Chin, personal banker. Joint account. Grandma Helen had legal access, which explained how she'd been able to withdraw everything. But more importantly, there was a specific banker who'd handled the account. Someone who might have records of exactly what happened. I called First National the next morning during my lunch break. Margaret Chen's office, this is Dorothy. Hi, I'm calling about my grandfather Joseph Thompson's college savings account. He passed away recently, and I'm trying to understand some transactions. I'm so sorry for your loss. Can you hold while I transfer you? Margaret Chen turned out to be a soft-spoken woman in her 50s who remembered Grandpa well. Joe was such a lovely man. He came in every month to make those deposits, always asked about the interest rates and growth projections. He was so excited about your education. My throat tightened. Ms. Chen, I need to ask you about what happened to the account. My grandmother says she withdrew the money, but I'm having trouble understanding the circumstances. There was a long pause. I see. Are you aware that your grandfather had specifically requested that any major transactions require written notification to both beneficiaries? Both beneficiaries? You were listed as the secondary beneficiary once you turned 18. Your grandfather was very particular about that. He wanted you to be informed of any changes to the account. Her voice grew careful. The withdrawal your grandmother made, well, let's just say I expressed concerns about the timing and amount. My pulse quickened. What kind of concerns? I probably shouldn't discuss this over the phone. But if you'd like to come in and review the account history, you have every legal right to do so. Especially given some of the irregularities in how the closure was handled. Irregularities. That word sent electricity through my entire body. I scheduled an appointment for Thursday after school, but the next day brought a complication I hadn't anticipated. I had the strangest conversation with Margaret Chin yesterday, Mom said over breakfast Wednesday morning. She called asking if our family needed any assistance during this difficult time. Said something about college funding concerns. My coffee mug froze halfway to my lips. She called you. She seemed to think there might be some confusion about Dad's college account for you. Asked if we'd received proper documentation about recent changes. Mom's brow furrowed. I told her everything was fine, but she seemed persistent. Do you know what that was about? I forced my voice to stay level. Probably just standard procedure after someone passes away. Banks have to verify everything. But internally, I was panicking. If Margaret Chen was reaching out to my parents, it meant the situation was even more irregular than I'd thought. It also meant I was running out of time before everything exploded without my control. That afternoon, I got another unwelcome surprise. I was restocking paint supplies when I overheard two customers talking near the register. Helen Thompson's really going all out for Christmas this year, one said. My sister works for Elegant Events, the catering company. Said Helen's party is their biggest order of the month. Good for her, the other replied. After losing Joe, she deserves to treat herself. Though I heard the bill was over $8,000 just for the food. $8,000. On catering alone. I excused myself to the stockroom and sat on a bucket of primer, doing mental math. Expensive catering, professional decorations, new jewelry, designer clothes, Grandma Helen was burning through my college fund like she'd won the lottery. But she'd also created a paper trail of exactly how she was spending stolen money. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Margaret Chin. Can we move our appointment to tomorrow morning? There are some additional documents I'd like you to see. This situation requires immediate attention. The walls were closing in from all sides. My parents were starting to ask questions. The bank was treating this as something serious enough for emergency meetings, and I still had 3 weeks before the Christmas party. Everything was accelerating beyond my control. But as I sat there surrounded by paint cans and hardware supplies, I realized something crucial. I wasn't the only one running out of time. Grandma Helen had gotten sloppy in her victory lap. The expensive purchases, the elaborate party planning, the lies to neighbors, she was creating evidence faster than she could cover it up. And tomorrow, I'd finally learn just how badly she'd screwed herself. The meeting with Margaret Chin changed everything. I sat across from her desk Thursday morning, my hands clammy as she spread out a stack of documents like she was laying down evidence in a courtroom. Her expression was grim, professional, but I could see anger simmering beneath the surface. What I'm about to show you, she said carefully, represents one of the most troubling cases I've encountered in 20 years of banking. The first document was a copy of the original account agreement from when I was born. Grandpa's signature was clear and bold next to a paragraph Margaret highlighted in yellow. Primary account holder requests that secondary beneficiary be notified in writing of any withdrawal exceeding $500 after their 18th birthday. Your grandmother was fully aware of this requirement, Margaret continued. I reminded her of it twice during the withdrawal process. The second document made my stomach drop. It was a handwritten letter dated November 16th, the day after she'd cleaned out the account. Asterisk to whom it may concern asterisk. Asterisk this letter serves as notification to my grandson regarding the closure of the college savings account. Due to unforeseen circumstances and poor academic performance, this money is being redirected to more practical family needs, asterisk. Helen Thompson. She wrote this after the withdrawal, Margaret said, her voice tight with disapproval. But she never sent it. I found it in her file when I was reviewing everything yesterday. My hands shook as I read it again. Poor academic performance. She documented a lie in writing, probably planning to use it as evidence that she'd followed proper procedure. But keeping the letter proved she'd never intended to actually notify me. There's more, Margaret said, producing another sheet. This is a record of her statements when she made the withdrawal. She claimed you dropped out of high school and were wasting your life on drugs and laziness. She said your grandfather had asked her to redirect the funds before he died. The room spun around me. She told you I was on drugs. I noted the discrepancy because your grandfather had spoken about your academic achievements just 2 months earlier. He'd brought in your report card to show me your GPA. Margaret's professional mask slipped slightly. Joseph was proud of you. What she described didn't match anything I'd observed. But the final document was the smoking gun. A printed email exchange between Grandma Helen and Elegant Events Catering, dated 3 days after the funeral. Asterisk Helen, I'd like to upgrade my Christmas package to the premium option. Money is no longer a concern, asterisk. Asterisk Elegant Events, wonderful. The premium package is $12,000. Will this be the same payment method as your deposit, asterisk? Asterisk Helen, yes, checking account. Consider it a celebration of new opportunities, asterisk. New opportunities. She was literally celebrating my stolen future. I've been banking for 2 decades, Margaret said, collecting the papers. I've never seen someone spend inheritance money this recklessly this quickly. But technically, as joint account holder, her actions weren't illegal. Just morally reprehensible. My heart sank. So there's nothing I can do. I didn't say that. She leaned forward. I said it wasn't illegal. But it might be fraudulent, depending on your grandfather's actual intentions. And if she lied about your circumstances to justify the withdrawal. She trailed off meaningfully. What would I need to prove fraud? Documentation of your grandfather's true wishes. Evidence that she misrepresented the facts. Proof that she acted against his explicit instructions. Margaret handed me copies of everything. I'd also need testimony from people who knew his actual plans for your education. I thought about the letter in his handwriting, the highlighted college brochures, the conversations with neighbors about my future. The pieces were there, scattered across weeks of careful deception. How long would something like that take? I asked. Months, possibly years. Banking fraud investigations move slowly, and she'd fight it every step of the way. Margaret's expression grew shrewd. Unless, of course, she were to voluntarily return the funds to avoid public scrutiny. Public scrutiny. The word sent electricity through my chest. Hypothetically, I said carefully, what would happen if this information became widely known among her social circles? Margaret Chen smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. Hypothetically. I imagine someone who cares deeply about her reputation might find that scenario quite motivating. I left the bank with copies of every document and a plan that was finally crystallizing into something concrete. Grandma Helen had been sloppy, arrogant, and cruel. Now I had the evidence to prove it. The Christmas party was 18 days away, and I finally had the ammunition I needed. But first, I had to figure out how to keep my parents from discovering everything before I was ready to detonate this bomb. The complications started piling up faster than I could handle them. Friday afternoon, I was organizing the evidence Margaret Chen had given me when Mom knocked on my bedroom door. My heart nearly exploded as I shoved the bank documents under my mattress. Come in. She entered with an expression I couldn't read, somewhere between concerned and suspicious. Honey, we need to talk. My mouth went dry. About what? I called State University today to ask about their payment schedule, wanted to make sure we had all the dates right. She sat on my bed, directly above where I'd hidden the papers. The financial aid office said you'd been calling them repeatedly about emergency funding options. They were concerned something had happened to your college money. Think fast. I told you, I was just exploring additional scholarships. They said you asked about deferring enrollment due to insufficient funds. Her voice was gentle but firm. That doesn't sound like someone with a full college account. I stared at my hands, mind racing through possible explanations that wouldn't immediately expose everything. Mom, there might be some complications with accessing the money right now. Because of Grandpa's death, legal stuff. It wasn't technically a lie, but it felt like swallowing glass. What kind of complications? The account was set up specifically to avoid probate issues. She leaned forward. Sweetheart, if there's a problem, we need to know. Your father and I can help figure it out. It's probably just temporary paperwork stuff, I said weakly. Bank bureaucracy after someone dies, you know. She didn't look convinced, but before she could press further, the phone rang downstairs. I heard Dad answer, then his voice calling up, it's Helen. She wants to talk about Christmas dinner assignments. Mom sighed. We'll continue this conversation later. But I want you to promise me, if there's really a problem with your college fund, you'll tell us immediately. I promise, I lied. After she left, I realized I'd bought myself maybe a day or two before she started making her own calls to investigate. The window for controlling this situation was slamming shut. But Saturday brought an even bigger disaster. I was at work when my phone exploded with notifications from Facebook. Someone had tagged me in a post on Grandma Helen's page, a photo of her at some fancy restaurant downtown, wearing what looked like a new diamond bracelet. Asterisk, treating myself to lunch at Le Bernardin. Sometimes we need to embrace life's luxuries, especially after loss. Joe always said money was meant to be enjoyed. Hashtag living my best life, hashtag blessed, hashtag new beginnings, asterisk. The comments were what made my blood boil. Asterisk, you deserve it, Helen. Joe would want you to be happy. Asterisk. Asterisk, that bracelet is gorgeous. Early Christmas present to yourself. Asterisk. Asterisk, so good to see you moving forward positively. Asterisk. But the comment that made me see red was from Mrs. Patterson, the neighborhood gossip. Asterisk, Helen, you're such an inspiration. And I heard your grandson is all set for college thanks to Joe's planning. What a blessing that you don't have to worry about that expense during this difficult time. Asterisk. Grandma Helen had responded, asterisk, yes, we're so grateful that Joe took care of everything. Our future engineer is all set. Smiling face with smiling eyes, asterisk. She was still maintaining the lie, still playing the supportive grandmother while wearing jewelry bought with my stolen future. The casual cruelty was breathtaking. Then I noticed something else in the comments. My cousin Sarah had written, asterisk, can't wait for Christmas. Mom said you're planning something really special this year. Asterisk. Grandma Helen's reply, asterisk, oh, it's going to be absolutely magical. I've spared no expense. After this difficult year, our family deserves a celebration they'll never forget. Asterisk. A celebration they'll never forget. At least she got that part right. I screenshot everything and added it to my growing evidence file. She was documenting her own guilt in real time, broadcasting her spending spree to the same relatives who'd witnessed my humiliation at the funeral. But when I got home that evening, I found Mom on the phone with someone, her voice strained. I understand there are privacy concerns, but I'm his mother. No, I'm not questioning the withdrawal, I just want to confirm. Can you at least tell me when? I see. She hung up and turned to me with an expression that made my stomach drop. That was your grandfather's bank. They can't give me specific information, but they confirmed that there have been significant recent changes to your college account. Her voice was deadly quiet. They suggested I speak with Helen directly about the details. Game over. In 12 hours, Mom would call Grandma Helen, and this whole thing would explode without my control. The Christmas party was 17 days away, but I was out of time. It was now or never. That night, I made a decision that would either save everything or destroy what was left of my family. I couldn't let Mom call Grandma Helen in the morning. Once that conversation happened, the whole situation would spiral beyond my control. Grandma would spin some story, Mom and Dad would get involved, and my carefully planned revenge would crumble into a messy family intervention that solved nothing. But I also couldn't tell my parents the truth, not yet. Not when I was this close to making Grandma Helen face real consequences for what she'd done. So I did something desperate. At 6 a.m., before Mom could make any calls, I texted her, emergency at work. Pipe burst in the stockroom, they need all hands. We'll be there all day. Can we talk tonight instead? It was a pathetic delay tactic, but it bought me 8 hours to figure something out. I spent my actual shift at Morrison's Hardware in a state of barely controlled panic, running scenarios in my head while mindlessly organizing inventory. Every time my phone buzzed, I expected it to be Mom calling to tell me she'd spoken with Grandma Helen and learned everything. But the text that finally came was from a number I didn't recognize. This is Sarah, your cousin. Can we talk? Something weird is going on with Grandma. My heart stopped. Sarah was Aunt Patricia's daughter, 2 years older than me and studying accounting at the local community college. We'd always gotten along well, but we weren't particularly close. Why was she texting me? I called her during my lunch break. Thank God you picked up, she said immediately. I've been trying to figure out who to talk to about this. Did you know Grandma's been spending money like crazy lately? What do you mean? I work part-time at Henderson's Jewelry downtown, Sarah continued. She came in last week and dropped $3,000 on a diamond bracelet. Paid cash. Then yesterday she was at the furniture store next door looking at a new dining room set for $8,000. My grip tightened on the phone. Did she buy it? That's what's weird. She kept talking about how she finally had real money for the first time in years. Said something about Joe being too conservative with their finances, but now she could make her own decisions. Sarah's voice dropped. It was uncomfortable. Like she was almost celebrating. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Grandma Helen wasn't just spending my college fund, she was going on a victory tour, flaunting her newfound wealth around town like she'd won the lottery. Sarah, I said carefully, did she mention where this money came from? She said something about life insurance being more generous than expected. But here's the thing, my mom talked to your mom about the insurance payout weeks ago. It was substantial, but not, drop $3,000 on jewelry, substantial. Not unless. She trailed off. Unless what? Unless there was money from other sources too. Sarah's voice grew thoughtful. Didn't Grandpa have a college fund set up for you? Mom always said he was saving for years. My chest tightened. Sarah was smart, accounting major, worked in retail, good with numbers. If she was putting pieces together, it was only a matter of time before other relatives started asking questions too. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because something felt wrong about the whole thing. And because. She hesitated. Because after the funeral, Mom mentioned that Grandma had said some harsh things about your college plans. Said you were having money problems. But if Grandpa's fund was still there, why would you have money problems? The walls were closing in from every direction. My parents were investigating, Sarah was asking questions, and Grandma Helen was painting a target on her own back with every expensive purchase. But maybe that wasn't entirely a bad thing. Sarah, I said slowly, how would you feel about helping me figure out exactly what's been going on with Grandma's finances? There was a long pause. Are we talking about something illegal? I don't know yet. But I think we're about to find out. Sarah agreed to meet me that evening at the coffee shop near campus, and by the time I hung up, my hands were shaking with a mixture of terror and possibility. Having an ally changed everything, but it also meant I couldn't control the narrative anymore. If Sarah was asking questions, other relatives might be too. The rest of my shift dragged by in a haze of anxiety. Every time the phone rang at the hardware store, I expected it to be Mom calling to tell me she'd uncovered everything. But when I finally got home at 6, the house was eerily quiet. I found a note on the kitchen counter, *, gone to dinner with Dad. Leftovers in fridge. We'll talk when we get back. Love, Mom. *. The reprieve should have been relief, but instead it felt ominous. Like the calm before a hurricane. I met Sarah at Grounded Coffee at 7:30, sliding into a corner booth where we could talk privately. She looked as stressed as I felt, clutching her laptop bag like it contained state secrets. Okay, she said without preamble, I've been thinking about this all afternoon, and something is really wrong. I ran some rough numbers based on what I know about Grandpa Joe's finances, and they don't add up. She pulled out a small notebook covered in her neat handwriting. Grandpa's life insurance through the factory was probably around $40,000, that's standard for his policy level. His savings account had maybe $15,000, based on what Mom mentioned. Social Security survivor benefits would cover Grandma's living expenses, but they wouldn't create this kind of spending money. My throat felt dry. What kind of spending money? I did some digging after we talked. Sarah flipped a page. That jewelry store visit was $3,000. But I called my friend who works at Elegant Events. She said Grandma's Christmas party deposit alone was $4,000, with $8,000 more due on delivery. That's $12,000 just on catering. She looked up at me with sharp, concerned eyes. Where does a woman on Social Security get $12,000 for a Christmas party? Especially 3 weeks after her husband's funeral. I sat there staring at her notebook, realizing that Sarah had independently arrived at the same conclusion I'd been avoiding. The numbers were impossible unless Grandma Helen had access to money that wasn't supposed to be hers. There's something else, Sarah continued, lowering her voice. I asked Mom about your college situation, just casually. She said the family was so relieved that Grandpa had taken care of everything, that you were all set financially. She paused. But at the funeral, Grandma made it sound like you were having problems. Like there wasn't enough money. The coffee shop suddenly felt suffocating. Sarah was reconstructing the entire situation through pure logic and family gossip, which meant she was maybe 10 minutes away from asking me directly if Grandma Helen had stolen my college fund. Sarah, I started, but she held up her hand. I'm not done. Here's what's really bothering me. She leaned forward. I've been working retail for 2 years. I know how people act when they're spending money they feel guilty about. And I know how people act when they're spending money they're excited about. Her eyes hardened. Grandma Helen looked excited. Almost gleeful. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom, *, coming home in 20 minutes. We need to have that conversation about your college funding. No more delays. * 20 minutes. That was how long I had before everything exploded anyway. I looked at Sarah, sitting across from me with her notebook full of evidence and her accounting major brain putting together a financial puzzle that painted her grandmother as a thief. She was already halfway to the truth, and she was asking the right questions to get the rest of the way there. Maybe it was time to stop trying to control this situation alone. Sarah, I said quietly, what I'm about to tell you is going to change how you see our family forever. I took a deep breath and looked into Sarah's expectant face. Grandma Helen stole my college fund. All of it. $50,000. The words hung in the air between us like a detonated bomb. Sarah's pen stopped moving, her mouth falling open slightly as she processed what I just said. What? Her voice was barely a whisper. The day of Grandpa's funeral, she told me the money was gone. Said she withdrew it because she needed it more, and college was a waste of money. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. Then she humiliated me in front of half the family, made it sound like I was some entitled brat having a tantrum. Sarah sat back in her chair, staring at me like I just told her the earth was flat. $50,000. From your education fund. I have bank documents proving it. She cleaned out the account 3 days after Grandpa went into the hospital for the last time. I pulled out my phone and showed her some of the photos I'd taken of Margaret Chen's paperwork. She even wrote a fake letter claiming I was a drug addict and high school dropout to justify it. Sarah's hands shook as she scrolled through the images. Her face went through a series of expressions: shock, disbelief, and finally, pure rage. This is why she's been spending like she won the lottery. She's literally shopping with your future. Gets worse. She's been lying to everyone, including my parents. They still think the money is there. They think I'm all set for state university. My phone buzzed again, 15 minutes until Mom got home. And I'm running out of time before they find out on their own. Jesus Christ. Sarah set down her phone with trembling fingers. The Christmas party. She's spending $12,000 on a party using money she stole from her own grandson. Her accounting brain was working overtime. How much of it is left? Based on what I've tracked. Maybe 15,000, if that. She's been on a spending spree for 3 weeks. I felt sick saying it out loud. Designer clothes, jewelry, fancy dinners. Like she's celebrating. Sarah's face had gone pale with anger. She stood at Grandpa's funeral and played the grieving widow while she'd already stolen your inheritance. That's... She struggled for words. That's sociopathic. The bank says it's technically legal since it was a joint account, but probably fraudulent since she lied about the circumstances. I leaned forward desperately. Sarah, I need help. I've been planning something for her Christmas party, but now my parents are asking questions and everything's falling apart. What kind of something? I hesitated, then decided I was already past the point of no return. I want to expose her. In front of the whole family. Make her face consequences for what she did. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, staring at her notebook full of financial calculations. When she finally looked up, her expression was steel. You know what the worst part is? She made me complicit. I helped her pick out that bracelet. Told her how beautiful it looked. Her voice cracked slightly. I was an accessory to spending your stolen college money. You didn't know. But I should have questioned it. The timing, the amount, her attitude. Sarah closed her notebook with a sharp snap. She played us all. Made us watch her humiliate you at the funeral, then went shopping with the evidence. My phone buzzed. Mom was 10 minutes away. I have to go, I said urgently. My parents are about to find out everything, and I need to figure out how to handle it. Wait. Sarah grabbed my arm. You said you were planning something for Christmas. Tell me what you need. I looked at her determined face and realized I just gained something I hadn't expected, a partner who was just as angry as I was. Meet me tomorrow, I said. I'll show you everything I've gathered. Because if we're going to take down Grandma Helen, we're going to do it right. I made it home with exactly 3 minutes to spare before my parents pulled into the driveway. My heart was hammering as I shoved the bank documents deeper under my mattress and tried to arrange my face into something resembling normal. The conversation with Sarah had changed everything. Having an ally felt empowering, but it also meant the secret was expanding beyond my control. And now, watching Mom and Dad walk through the front door with identical expressions of parental determination, I knew my time for managing this situation had officially run out. Living room, Mom said without preamble. Now. Dad looked grim as he settled into his recliner. This wasn't going to be a gentle inquiry, this was an intervention. We've been doing some research, Mom began, pulling out a folder I hadn't seen before. After my conversation with the bank yesterday, I decided to make a few more calls. My stomach dropped. Mom, I can explain. I spoke with State University's financial aid office. They said you've been calling about emergency funding options for weeks. They're concerned something happened to your college money. She opened the folder. Then I called your guidance counselor at school. She said you'd asked about community college transfer programs and part-time enrollment options. Dad leaned forward. Son, these aren't the actions of someone whose college fund is secure. These are the actions of someone who's lost their financial aid. I sat there staring at them, my carefully constructed walls crumbling. It's complicated. Then uncomplicated, Mom said firmly. Is your college money gone? The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. I could lie again, buy myself more time, hope Sarah and I could fix everything before they found out. But looking at their worried faces, I realized I was tired of carrying this alone. Yes, I whispered. The money's gone. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's folder slipped from her fingers, papers scattering across the coffee table. Dad's face went through several emotions before settling on controlled fury. Gone how? He asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Grandma Helen withdrew it. All $50,000. The day after Grandpa went into the hospital. The words tumbled out in a rush. She said she needed it more than I did, that college was a waste of money. She what? Mom's voice cracked like a whip. She cleaned out the account while he was dying, then told me at the funeral that there was no college fund anymore. I felt tears threatening. Then she humiliated me in front of everyone, made it sound like I was being entitled and ungrateful. Dad stood up so abruptly his chair rocked. That manipulative, thieving. Joe, Mom warned, but her own face was flushed with rage. When did this happen? Why didn't you tell us? At the funeral. Right after the service. You were both so upset about losing Grandpa, I didn't want to make it worse. I wiped my eyes. I thought maybe I could fix it somehow, find a way to get the money back. Fix it how? Mom demanded. You're 18 years old. This isn't your responsibility to fix. That's when Dad asked the question I've been dreading, where's the money now? I took a shaky breath. She's been spending it. Designer clothes, jewelry, that expensive Christmas party she's planning. I think there's maybe 15,000 left. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Mom and Dad exchanged a look that could have melted steel. She's been spending your college fund on Christmas party decorations, Mom said slowly, like she was testing whether the words made sense out loud. While lying to our faces about everything being fine. I'm calling her right now, Dad said, reaching for his phone. Wait. I jumped up. Please, can we think about this first? If you call her now, she'll just lie and manipulate the situation like she always does. Mom looked at me with a mixture of pride and heartbreak. Sweetheart, what were you planning to do? I hesitated, then decided they deserved the truth. I was going to expose her at the Christmas party. In front of everyone. Make her face consequences for what she did. Dad actually smiled, though it wasn't a pleasant expression. You know what? That's not a bad idea. The next morning brought a complication I should have seen coming. Dad had barely slept. I could hear him pacing the hallway until 3 a.m., and at breakfast he looked like he was planning a war. Which, in retrospect, he probably was. I've been thinking about this all night, he said, setting down his coffee with the deliberate control of someone trying not to break things. We need to involve the police. My heart lurched. Dad, no. The bank said it's technically legal since she was on the account. Legal doesn't mean it wasn't fraud. She lied about your circumstances, forged justifications, violated your grandfather's explicit instructions. His jaw was tight. This is theft, plain and simple. Mom nodded grimly. Your father's right. We can't let her get away with this just because she's family. But if we call the police now, she'll know we're onto her, I argued desperately. She'll hide the remaining money, destroy evidence, spin some story about family disputes. We'll lose any chance of getting justice. That's when my phone rang. Sarah's name flashed on the screen, and I had a sinking feeling about the timing. I need to take this, I said, stepping into the kitchen. We have a problem, Sarah said immediately. A big one. My mom just called Grandma Helen. My blood turned to ice. About what? Apparently Mom couldn't sleep last night either, kept thinking about our conversation at dinner where I asked about your college fund. She decided to call and congratulate Grandma on how well you were doing financially. Sarah's voice was tight with panic. Wanted to tell her how proud the family was that Grandpa had taken care of everything. Oh no. It gets worse. Grandma got defensive immediately, started talking about how college was overrated and maybe you weren't as prepared as everyone thought. Mom said it was weird, like she was trying to convince herself as much as Mom. I slumped against the kitchen counter. Does your mom suspect anything? She's confused. Called me afterward asking why Grandma would be negative about your college plans when the money was supposedly all set. Sarah paused. I think I convinced her it was just grief talking, but she's going to mention it to other relatives. The story's starting to unravel. When I hung up and returned to the dining room, Mom and Dad were deep in discussion about legal options. The sight of their determined faces filled me with both gratitude and terror. We can't wait, Dad was saying. Every day we delay, she spends more money and creates more lies to cover her tracks. I agree, but we need to be strategic about this, Mom replied. If we handle it wrong, she'll play the victim and turn half the family against us. That's when I realized something that made my stomach drop. There's something else. Sarah's mom called Grandma Helen this morning asking about my college fund. Grandma got defensive and weird about it. Both parents looked at me sharply. What kind of weird? Mom asked. Like she was trying to plant seeds that maybe I'm not ready for college after all. Sarah thinks she's preparing some kind of backup story in case people start asking questions. Dad's face darkened. She's already spinning a narrative to discredit you before anyone discovers the theft. Which means we're running out of time, Mom added. If she starts telling people you're having academic problems or attitude issues, it'll be harder to prove her claims about your unsuitability for college were fabricated. The walls were closing in faster than I could think. Grandma Helen was getting suspicious, my extended family was starting to ask questions, and my parents wanted to involve authorities who might not be able to prove fraud anyway. But the worst part was yet to come. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is your grandmother. We need to talk. Family meeting at my house tonight at 7 p.m. Don't bring your parents. She knew. The text from Grandma Helen stared back at me like a threat. Family meeting at my house tonight at 7 p.m. Don't bring your parents. My hands were shaking as I showed the message to Mom and Dad. The timing wasn't coincidental. Sarah's mom had called her this morning, and now suddenly Grandma wanted a private meeting with me. She was trying to get ahead of something. Absolutely not, Dad said immediately. You're not going anywhere near that woman alone. But if I don't show up, she'll know we're all onto her, I argued, though the thought of facing her terrified me. She might disappear the rest of the money, or worse, call everyone in the family with some story about how I'm trying to extort her. Mom was reading the text over my shoulder, her expression grim. She's panicking. People are asking questions she can't answer cleanly, so she wants to control the narrative before it gets away from her. That's when my phone rang again. This time it was Aunt Patricia. Don't answer, Dad warned, but I was already swiping to accept. Hi, Aunt Patricia. Honey, I just had the strangest conversation with your grandmother. Her voice sounded confused and slightly concerned. I called to ask about carpooling arrangements for Christmas, and she started going on about how worried she is about your recent behavior. My stomach clenched. My behavior? She said you've been acting entitled and irresponsible lately, making unrealistic demands about money. Said she's concerned you might not be mature enough for college after all. Patricia paused. It was odd because she seemed almost rehearsed. Like she was practicing a speech. I caught my parents' eyes, they could hear every word, and their expressions were murderous. That's weird, I managed. I haven't made any demands about anything. That's what I thought. You've always been such a responsible kid. But she kept insisting that maybe the family had overestimated your readiness for independence. Patricia's confusion was evident. She even suggested that Joe might have been wrong about setting up that college fund, that maybe the money should be used for more practical purposes. There it was. Grandma Helen was already seeding the idea that Grandpa had been mistaken, that his decision to save for my education was somehow flawed. She was rewriting history in real time. Anyway, Patricia continued, she wanted me to pass along that you should come by her house tonight to clear the air about some family financial matters. Said it was important to handle things privately before they got blown out of proportion. After I hung up, the three of us sat in heavy silence. Grandma Helen wasn't just panicking, she was orchestrating a preemptive strike. The private meeting, the calls to relatives about my supposed behavioral problems, the suggestions that Grandpa's college fund was misguided, she was building a case against me before I could build one against her. She's going to try to gaslight you, Mom said quietly. Make you doubt your own memory of what happened, convince you that you misunderstood the situation. Or she'll try to make some kind of deal, Dad added. Offer you partial money back in exchange for your silence, make it seem like she's being generous instead of admitting she stole everything. My phone buzzed with another text, this one from Sarah, emergency. Grandma just called my mom asking detailed questions about your academic performance and work ethic. Wanted to know if our family had ever noticed any concerning behaviors from you. Mom's really confused and starting to ask me what's going on. The net was tightening around all of us. In less than 8 hours, I'd have to sit across from the woman who'd stolen my future and try to navigate whatever trap she was setting. But maybe that wasn't entirely a bad thing. Because Grandma Helen was moving so fast to control the situation that she was making mistakes, leaving evidence, showing her desperation to anyone paying attention. You know what? I said, looking at my parents' furious faces and thinking about all the evidence Sarah and I had gathered. I think I should go to that meeting. Absolutely not, Mom started, but I held up my hand. Not alone. And not to negotiate. A plan was crystallizing in my mind, born from weeks of rage and careful documentation. I think it's time for Grandma Helen to face the entire family at once. Dad raised an eyebrow. What are you thinking? Her Christmas party is in 10 days. She's already invited everyone, spent thousands on catering, made it this huge memorial celebration for Grandpa. I pulled out my phone. What if we moved up the timeline? I started typing a group message to every family member I had contact information for. Hey everyone. Grandma Helen asked me to invite you all for a special pre-Christmas family gathering tonight at 7 p.m. She has some important news to share about Grandpa's legacy and wants the whole family there. Hope you can make it. Mom's eyes widened. You're ambushing her. She wanted a family meeting, I said, hitting send. She's getting one. The responses started flooding in immediately. Aunt Patricia, wonderful. See you there. Uncle Robert, wouldn't miss it. Sarah, OMG yes. Bringing popcorn. By 6 p.m., I'd gotten confirmations from 14 relatives. Grandma Helen's house was about to be packed with every family member she'd been lying to for weeks. I'm calling Margaret Chen, I told my parents as we drove toward Grandma's neighborhood. She said she'd be willing to explain the banking irregularities if it would help resolve the situation. When we pulled up to the house, the driveway was already crowded with cars. Through the front window, I could see Grandma Helen pacing frantically, clearly unprepared for the invasion of relatives responding to my mass invitation. Sarah met us at the front door, grinning wickedly. She's been running around for an hour trying to figure out why everyone's coming. Keeps asking people what they know about family financial matters. We walked into a living room packed with confused but curious relatives. Grandma Helen stood near the fireplace, her face pale but her chin raised defiantly. The expensive bracelet glittered on her wrist, my college fund transformed into jewelry. Well, she said, her voice artificially bright. This is quite a surprise. I was only expecting. The whole family, I interrupted, stepping into the center of the room. Since you wanted to discuss family financial matters publicly. The room went quiet. Everyone was staring at me, then at Grandma Helen, sensing the tension but not understanding it yet. Grandma, I continued, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room, why don't you tell everyone what happened to Grandpa's college fund for me? Her face went white, then red. I don't think this is the time or place. The $50,000 he saved for 18 years, I pressed on. The money he worked double shifts for, the money he wrote me a letter about, promising it would always be there for my education. Murmurs started rippling through the room. Aunt Patricia looked confused. Uncle Robert frowned. Sarah pulled out her phone and started recording. You told me at his funeral that the money was gone, I continued, my voice getting stronger. That you'd withdrawn it because you needed it more, and college was a waste of money. Then you humiliated me in front of everyone, made me look like an entitled brat for being upset about losing my future. That's not, Grandma Helen started, but I was done being interrupted. Margaret Chen from First National Bank is outside in the car, I announced. She has documentation of how you withdrew every penny while Grandpa was dying, then lied about my academic performance to justify it. Should I invite her in to explain the paper trail of where that money went? The room erupted.